Friends, this is Carter, and welcome to Making It Up, the conversation series where two writers just sit down and talk for about 45 minutes, and at the end, we do a little storytelling together. Impromptu, scary, usually a shit show, always a good time. Before I get to today's guests, I just want to plug Unbound Writer. That's my company, Unbound Writer. So with Unbound Writer, my goal is to just help writers. I love helping writers. I love talking about writing. I love talking to other writers, hence this podcast. And through Unbound Writer, I would say the preponderance of what I do is I work one-on-one with different aspiring writers, either through manuscript editing, manuscript coaching, developmental editing, for example, or sometimes we just honestly have phone conversations. We just have Zoom calls where, I hold them accountable to a certain amount of writing. There's some kind of psychological elements to my coaching, getting people kind of on the path and away from their fears or overcoming their fears, whatever those fears may be. But I will tell you, one of the reasons I started Unbound Writer was because I have been through it all, coming from a background of not ever wanting to be a writer, not even, or at least not even ever thinking of that. That was never in my purview. And then all of a sudden, writing my first book, not knowing what I was doing, not knowing what an agent was, and then kind of starting that climb and then going through a lot of failure. So I understand what it's like to be rejected a lot. I understand what it's like to be scared of if I'm good enough. I know what imposter syndrome is. I know how hard it is to say out loud, I am a writer. So I do coaching on a lot of those things because, again, I've been through all of it. And I can tell you there are certain attitudes that you can hold dearly that will help you overcome a lot of the uncertainty that exists within not only you as a writer, but within the publishing world as well. So if you're interested in any kind of coaching, you can check out my website, unboundwriter.com. Brand new website. It's all very pretty, and see if we might be a good fit. And you can also sign up for a complimentary phone call just to, again, see what your issues are and see how I might be able to help. All right, so today I had a thriller mystery writer on the show. What a surprise! I do tend to talk to a lot of thriller mystery writers because that's what gets pitched to me a lot, and these are people I love to talk to. So today I talked to Danna, who also writes as Sara Driscoll. So Jen is a Canadian who worked for 30 years with infectious diseases. That sounded kind of wrong how I just said that. Studying infectious diseases, I should say. Always kind of wanted to be a writer. The goal was always to write, but she didn't pursue that professionally. And then as her kids got older, she decided after a 25-year break from some early writing to start revisiting writing again. As we talked in the conversation, published her first novel in 2013, and now she has 23 novels out. So she's highly productive. Her most recent book is Deadly Trade, which is part of the FBI K-9 series that she writes. It's book number 10, just came out in late last year. But it was fascinating to talk to her because she is so productive and because she's working on 3 books a year and because she's a heavy outliner, we're very different. So it was fascinating to hear about how she approaches things. And just, I think the one thing that's true for all of us is she just has obviously a massive passion for what she's working on. Even if she, as she proclaims, she might be working on 4 or 5 books at once, she has to make sure everything's organized to a way that she remembers what she's doing, but you can just tell the fierce passion is there for every word that she writes. And at the end, we make up a creepy little, spooky little story using a brief sentence from an old, long John Jakes novel. This is a good one, folks. You're going to like this one. This is my conversation with Danna, who also writes as Sara Driscoll. and one of the reasons I even founded this podcast was because I always loved when I was interviewed where it was just like talking to other writers. It wasn't like, hey, here are the 5 questions about a specific motivation for a book. I just never, I wanted to talk to
Yeah.
writers.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
And so,
great.
and it's funny, like I do
Everybody's got
this,
a slightly different journey.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's fascinating to see the threads between everybody. And, you do a few hundred of these and you're like, oh, this is really interesting. Here's the type. I can tell almost
Mhm.
what that type is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I'd be curious to know from you because there are a few different types, I should say, but the one thing that I have found as a through line with most writers that I talk to is this underlying tenacity, bordering on, kind of chaotic stubbornness of like, I can do this. I don't know what I'm
I
doing,
was
but I
about
can
to
do
say
this.
control freak, but yeah. Yeah.
Right. And just not willing to give, like, there's so many instances where you hear about writers giving up, but the people who I talk to who are published, that's the thing. Is like, I come hell or high water. I'm
Yeah.
getting
Oh
this.
yeah, absolutely.
What's
Yeah.
what was it like for you? Were you a kid who was into reading and writing?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I was into into my parents' bookshelves really early. My dad has, and I still have them, some first edition Earl Stanley Gardners,
Mhm.
which are amazing. My mom read a lot of Agatha Christie, so I sort of got into the whole sort of mystery fiction very early.
Yeah.
I have mom's first edition Nancy Drew books,
Oh
so I
wow.
read. I read really early and I read a lot. And then I started writing for fun with a girlfriend. And she lived about 5 hours north of me and in Sudbury, and I lived just outside of Toronto. And she was writing and I was writing. We used to snail mail each other chapters. And I
Like how
dearly
old were
wish
you
I,
when you were doing this?
12? I dearly
Wow.
wish I had still kept them
That's right. That's the
because
ultimate pen pal experience.
yeah, but also there's nothing wrong with the learning curve.
Right.
Like it would have been interesting to sort of see the beginning of the journey. It would have been awful. But that was how I got started. And
In,
the funny
right.
thing is that she is a published children's author, R.J. Anderson, and I'm now a thriller author. And so those early days really worked. But I did not, I have grade 13 English in the Ontario school system, and that is it for my official training to be an author. I don't have an MFA. I have a Bachelor of Science. I was an infectious diseases and vaccinologist,
Yeah.
sort of researcher for 32 years. So I don't have any official training to be an author, but you read voraciously long enough and you pick up structure. You pick
Yeah,
up
it's
how to
on the
write.
job training. I mean, I'm the same way. Like I eschewed reading as much as I could as a kid and as a teenager and a business degree and zero interest, zero aspirations to write. I just started writing and you never took a class and you just, yeah, you learn by doing. Like
Mhm.
Nancy Drew, that's a great gateway kind of a read to understand the mechanics of intrigue.
Yeah.
And then you mostly just learn by failing. you,
Well,
you
yeah.
and
Yeah.
and you started learning when you were 12, so you're getting a lot of that failing out of the way.
Well, and the
Early,
funny thing was that I sort of wrote as a preteen, and then I got busy in high school and I went to university and I met my husband and I got married and I had 2 kids and I had a career and I stopped writing for about 25 years.
yeah,
And then the kids got older and they didn't need me quite so much. And so I kind of was getting bored at my job. I mean, my job was really interesting. It was, I was an HIV researcher at the time.
oh wow,
It
yeah,
wasn't like it wasn't a fascinating profession, but when you do a job, even a fascinating job long enough, it just gets a little bit staid and boring.
sure,
And so I went back to writing, and because I just sort of needed, we're a very creative family. I have 2 brothers who are film composers.
okay,
So the creative side is sort of there, and it was apparently knocking to get out. And so I got back into writing sort of in my late 30s, but
yeah.
I hadn't written since I was a preteen.
And that's the other through line that I see with a lot of authors is that everyone kind of, even if you think about it as something you want to do when you're a teenager, nobody at that age seems to take it seriously. Like, well, this
Mm.
clearly isn't a real job. Or their parents tell them that or whatever. So they all kind of go into their whatever lives.
Yeah.
And then I'm convinced if you are a real author, it worms its way out of you at some point in your life. For me, I was 33. You were in your upper 30s. I've
Yeah.
interviewed people who started, Hank Philippi Ryan in her 50s. It's just like somehow that bug is in there, and it's just been
Well,
it's
and
just
people
been
have said to me,
festering.
I'm in my 70s, I'd like to write a book. Is it too late? No, it's never too late. Start now.
Now, and you can start in your 20s, and the best can be
Hmm.
happening in your 80s. Like you,
Yeah.
that's what I love about this industry, because there's a lot of things to hate about it. There's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of uncertainty. But part of that uncertainty is like, my breakout novel was my 10th book last year.
Yeah.
And after 22 years of writing, like that one just hit. And I'm like, that's great. It's not like
Hmm.
you peak with your debut and then you struggle. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah.
The unknown
It's
is
sort of like we
beautiful.
always say in science that if the experiment works the first time, it'll never work again. So it's almost better to, sort of get into the craft and we all, sort of grow as we go. I mean, what does Stephen King say? The first million words are practice.
Right.
And I highly, highly believe in that. I wrote 5 trunk novels that will never see the light of day.
Yeah, I've got three. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
they were agented, but they never sold. So it's just like
Oh, mine
that.
were just I was writing for fun online because that was how I got started, was just writing. When I went back to writing in my 30s, I was just writing and posting stuff online for fun. I was just writing for me because
Right,
I was enjoying it.
right.
And that's when I picked up my writing partner, Ann Vanderlaan. And then we wrote, these books together. And then people were saying to us, why aren't you doing this professionally? And we sort of looked at each other across like 2,000 miles because she was in Texas and I'm outside of Toronto and said, why aren't we doing this? And then we scrapped everything we'd ever done and started again from scratch. And that was the first novel we sent out on submission to. Well, we looked for an agent for, got our agent, and then went out on proper submission.
So how did you meet her?
My agent?
No, 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 no. Your
Oh, Anne.
co-author.
Okay, so this is kind of a funny story because I'm a gun control loving Canadian, and she was what I
She's a
said was a
Texan.
gun toting Texan who had
Yeah,
lived years in the woods in West Virginia, and so always had, just to protect her property from wolves and bears, and always had a firearm on
right.
hand.
She
Right.
was the,
So
the the kind who, like, that's why you have firearms. That's the real
yes,
reason.
exactly. Yeah. But she still had them when she was in Texas, and I made a gun error, And so she texted me or she sent me a message, a private message, and basically said, "You just killed your protagonist." I'm like, "Oops." But that
This
was,
is through the online,
yeah,
where
through
you were
the
posting
online stuff that
online.
I was posting. And so that started a conversation.
That's funny.
And we sort of went back and forth, and then she started to sort of beta read for me, and then what she was suggesting was so good, and she was kind of getting into the nuts and bolts and sort of the tinkering that we started planning stuff together. And that was how we just sort of continued, even when we got into our published works, was that I wrote 100% of everything, and I would write a chapter and I would send it to her, and she would rip it apart, and I'd send it back, and then we'd build it back up together again, and then we would do the entire novel that way too.
Wow.
So I used to say she unfortunately, Anne has passed. She passed a couple of years ago.
Oh.
But I used to say she used to let me borrow her devious brain. It was quite wonderful.
But that's also a very, it's funny with co-authoring, it just has to work. You have to find, and
Mhm.
you don't know how, if it's going to work until you get into it. You can plan all you want. And your method
Mhm.
is, I would consider that to be highly risky, right? Because you're writing everything and then she's tearing it apart, which is great.
Yep.
But I could also see that being like, hey, I need a little help here, but
Well,
I've
yeah.
co-authored and that's what I've done. And I'm like, I want to write it. I need that control initially.
Well, and we did all the planning together too. So she was like
Right.
right in there from the beginning, like all the story planning, all the character planning. And I am not a pantser. I don't know how people who do that can
I am a
manage it.
pantser.
I know you are. I mean, I don't get, writer's block. If I am having trouble getting words on the page, that says to me that I don't know where I'm going and I need to
Yeah.
stop, do a little more detailed planning, and then I can keep it up again. So that's because I kind of, when I plan, I do something called milestoning, which means you sort of hit like the big points in the story, but it leaves lateral movement for that sort of, pantsing, characterization pantsing as you go.
Right.
But especially when you're writing, depends on the kind of book, but the first series that Ann and I wrote together was a forensic mystery series. And when you're writing a forensic mystery series, all of the clues have to add up to, sort of the end result. So
Right.
you have to do some planning around that because otherwise, like the whole thing just falls apart. So I kind of got into the habit of planning, when I was doing that series.
Yeah, I can, traditional mysteries, I think, lend themselves well if your brain is an outliner kind of a brain, because there are definitely beats you have to hit.
Hmm.
And there's a structure that's commonly kind of accepted. But I always contend that it's just how your brain works. Like I don't think you should try to force yourself to be one or the other. I think you write and
Yeah.
you over time you figure out what your brain is, because I think it's a matter of just, even for those of us who are pantsers, I'm convinced the outline's there. I just can't tap into it until I start writing, because I have these moments, and which is why I'm always so fascinated with people who outline. And you just said it yourself. You have your milestones, but then you have latitude within those milestones for characterization development.
Hmm.
The way that my brain works is I might have a thought even over the next three chapters, like, okay, this should be what happens. And then inevitably I think of something that I find more interesting as I'm doing it.
Hmm.
And I think, like, if you outline the whole thing, what happens if you do have this weird aha moment, like, no, this is way more interesting. And that happens halfway in and you have everything structured out. Does that happen to you?
Not as much because sort of the way that I milestone it is it's like there's like the poster like this close at the beginning, and then as I get, because you hand in an outline to your editor because he wants to kind of know where you're going. They want to write the back cover copy. So the first third is really pretty fairly well outlined, and then like the next third it's like a little less outlined, and the next third it's even like a little less outlined. So I know sort of who's responsible because now, like I wrote the forensic mystery series, but since then it's all been thrillers.
Yeah.
And, so I maybe, like we know who's responsible, or at least I know in my head who's responsible, but when it's a little less outlined towards the end, it gives you that opportunity to take that left turn. Because yeah, sometimes when you're writing, just you get to a point and something occurs to you and it's like, wow, why didn't I think of that the first time? That's great. And then you just you dart off in that
It
direction.
just is fascinating to me because, for example, I'm working on the second of a two book deal. So I have to turn it in August. And I gave, I don't know, four paragraphs about what the book is about. That's a big commitment for me because I'm like, I don't know. I'm 60,000 words in. It's pretty remarkably different than those four paragraphs. I have no clue what the ending is going to be. I'll know
Okay.
probably around 70,000 words. It'll start kind of like, well, maybe this. I mean, I know a few things that need to happen and what absolutely can't happen. But aside from that, I just hope. But you write enough that you learn to
Hmm.
trust however it is your brain works. And you're
Yeah,
like,
see, that would make me anxious, not knowing where I'm going. But part of my problem with that too is that, I mean, I only have 4 months to write a book. And because when I'm doing 3 books a year, there's only 4 months to write a book. But while I'm writing each book, I'm promoting the book before and I'm doing pages for the book before that. And then I'm doing copy. Like I'm often working on 4 or 5 books at a time. So if I don't know where I'm going in the book that I'm drafting, like, yeah, that would just make me very anxious.
yeah, well, we're very different that way too, because I'm not
Yeah.
writing that much. I'm writing, a book a year basically, and maybe some other side projects, but because I can't, that's to me, that's incomprehensible. And you are among many people who write like that, but I don't get it. I don't get how you do, but some people just have this ability to sit down for hours and produce, and it doesn't stop flowing, and it certainly helps that you've outlined. But I don't have that kind of muscle because I'm only an hour a day writer, and
Okay.
I could
Yeah,
write
like
more than that, but to me I almost feel I I feel the diminishing returns. You
Right.
know, you get to that point, and you probably do too, but it might be 4 hours in where you're just like, I'm forcing it now,
Yeah.
and I'm taking away some of the quality, I think. And when you're not even outlining, then it's like, now I'm just making shit up just to get words down. And you know
Well,
you're
and
going to end up
I
cutting
do
them.
sort of feel that too, because I think, I've done like 3 years of 3 books a year, and I've sort of come to the conclusion that it's maybe a bit much, and I'd
Yeah.
rather drop back to two.
Yeah.
When I'm doing 3 books a year, it's like I have a 3,000 words per day word count that
I mean,
has to
that's
be
crazy.
met.
That's like almost double NaNoWriMo, you
I
know?
know and so at this point, I'm like, okay, I've done it. I think it's time to step back a little bit, maybe just work on 2 books a year. And 2 books is probably going to be more time than I need, but then I could work on something else sort of on and off in the background that could always be sold on its own or something like that. Or heavens, take a week off because I don't take
Yeah. Yeah.
vacations.
God forbid.
Yeah.
I mean, but there is something about, because the writing is the thing that I do 7 days a week. It's like, and
Mhm.
again, it's an hour a day. So it's not a huge, but it's also the thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
It's the thing I wake up and I look forward to, because I'm like, what's going to happen today? And so the idea of like, oh, let me take a week off doesn't feel necessarily good to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels like, and not in an unhealthy way, not in a workaholic kind of way, but it's like, this is how I exercise my brain. This is who I am as a person. It's, so
Yeah.
it's like reading books. I wouldn't take a week off of reading books because I enjoy reading books.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for
So,
sure. Yeah.
but that volume that you're producing, because you have a lot of books out under two different names, and 3 years writing 3 books a year, is like Kensington saying this is what we want, or is that you're just like, I'm capable of this, so I'm going to give you a lot of books if that's okay.
Well, I was writing 2 books a year for Kensington in the two sort of ongoing series, the NYPD Negotiators and the FBI K-9 series. And I kind of wanted to stretch a little bit. And so I decided to write a standalone. And so, I did like the typical, proposal, 3 chapters and the outline and handed it off to Nicole, my agent, and she went off to shop it. But she said, I'm going to talk to James first at Kensington because, he's your editor and we want to give him a first crack at it. And
Right.
that
Even though
ended up
contractually they probably didn't have a right to that necessarily because it
no,
was
they didn't.
stand.
But she just
Yeah.
thought,
Right.
that
Of
that was
course.
the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
way. He's the existing editor, give him first crack at it.
Right.
But they came back with a 3 book deal, which I was not expecting.
You're
So
like, give me a break.
that's right. So after I already had, two book deals going on, they then added in a 3 book deal. And so that was Christmas of 2022. I found out about that and I came back from Christmas and I handed in my retirement notice at work. So at that point, I had been working, I'd been at McMaster University in Hamilton for 32 years.
Yeah.
And I could have retired as early as, get this date, March of 2020. But
Hmm.
I'm an infectious diseases researcher, and we were watching the pandemic coming as soon as
Right.
we came back from
Right.
Christmas in January of that
It was
year.
about to clock in some overtime for a
Yeah,
few
and so my
years.
last 3 years in the lab was nothing but COVID,
Yeah,
and
of
it was
course. But
crazy hell.
fascinating. I have to
Oh yeah.
imagine that's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was. We were doing national and international human-based trials and, around vaccines and all of this kind of stuff. It was great work. But at that point, I'm like, I was still carrying 2 books a year through that. In fact, I had a book due June 1st of 2020. It was the second book in the Negotiators series. And by May, I was just writing to my editor going, I'm really sorry. And this really feels like the dog ate my homework kind of excuse, but we're working 12 hours a day in the lab and I am not going to make this deadline. And
Yeah.
she just said, I don't know why any of us think that things are normal right now,
Right.
have an extra 2 months.
Right.
And I got it
Right.
done in 6 weeks, like that kind of thing. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a lot at that point, but I was still carrying the 2 books a year plus working full time. But once the extra contract came, it was like, nope, time to retire and work full time from home. And at
Yeah.
that point, I could like that had always been when I first started to publish. My slogan for this was always go big or go home. I didn't want to look back at it in 15 years and think, why didn't you even give it a shot?
Yeah.
So that was starting in about 2009. And the first book came out in 2013. And it was one book a year for years. And then it was two books. And then it became three books. So by the time it was three books a year, I could, financially afford to retire from the lab and just concentrate on writing, which
So
was,
how many books do you have out now with
I've
with
just
Deadly
finished
Trade?
the 23rd.
That's crazy. Because my first
So
book was published in 2012, and I have 10 that are out. And
yeah,
and to me
yeah.
that sounds impressive. I'm like, man,
Well, there are lots who do more than me. So, but everybody sort of does what they can do. But I always, from the time that I started publishing, my goal was to be able to do it full time.
yeah.
Knowing that I had retirement from the lab coming in the future. So that had always been my goal. So I did finally get there, but it took 10 years to get there, but slow and steady wins the race.
But the idea of even supporting oneself on an ongoing basis with fiction writing is it's kind of a lottery at this point.
Hmm.
It's so rare and so difficult, and you can define supporting oneself however you want to define
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And there's obviously very different ranges in incomes, but the idea of even paying a monthly mortgage with income from writing is unattainable. I wouldn't even guess the number, but I would say it would be 99% plus
Yeah.
of writers, and maybe
Might be
slightly
a little
lower.
higher than that, but it's definitely the to be able to do that is a giant minority.
Yeah, yeah, a giant minority. And so so it's funny because we tend not to allow ourselves to think of that ever being a possibility. And for years it isn't. I'm sure when you first started out, obviously you had another great job, but you probably weren't looking at these royalty checks and saying like, I could retire now. Like,
Oh yeah, no. No.
it's funny. I just got a royalty check from a foreign edition for an older book, and it was 85 cents. And I'm like, this is not totally unusual. Like, this
Yeah,
isn't
no,
like
it's not. Yeah.
crazy. And I
Yeah.
don't think most people understand, you know, you're playing the numbers in a good way in the sense, and I'm sure it's not cynically driven by this, but writing three books a year, you have more product out there. So you're
Yeah.
collecting royalties on different books. You're not just relying on one book, and that's a great way to do it as well. I mean, you do it because you're capable of doing that and you love doing it. Um, but that's a great way of doing it. Once you have a backlist, it definitely helps, but it's a struggle. And I think a lot of writers, I don't know if a lot is correct. I think you're in trouble if you're a writer and you're thinking about the money. uh,
Yeah, if that's the reason why you're getting into writing, you're going to be your chances of being successful just went down because then you're probably also gaming the system. Like, when vampire books were big, you're like, okay, I'm going to write a vampire
right,
book. But if you're traditionally publishing, you're 2 weeks behind, 2 weeks, 2 years behind the curve
right,
from the moment you start.
right,
I mean,
right,
another issue right now is just all the AI garbage that's, going up on Amazon. I mean, didn't they limit it at one point to only three books per person a day? Like something ridiculous like that.
oh, I don't even
So
know.
there's now
That's
even
so
more
gross.
competition,
Yeah,
for all of us.
yeah, yeah. I know. It would be a very hard time to be trying to break through right now. And there's more work outside of writing. I think you have to do to
Hmm.
establish yourself as
Yeah.
as a real person,
Hmm.
B as a personality, C as a writer, and that means you have maybe you're hiring your own PR team. You're very active on social media. I mean, I think about that all the time. Even just my last book came out in January 2025. My next one is not till November of this year, and I'm
Right.
like, my job is to stay relevant and in
Yeah.
front of
Yeah.
people. And and if you're putting out AI garbage, that's not what you're doing. Like, you're
No,
just this,
no, for
and you're
sure.
just hoping people are going to spend 99 cents on a Kindle copy of your garbage. But I don't know, I don't know how, even if it's a good book, even if AI gets to the point where it's a compelling story, do people want to buy that versus do people want the brand recognition.
I think at first it maybe seemed like a novelty, but now human created art is becoming like a boutique item, and it's becoming more desirable in some ways because people are tired of AI slop, the images and all of this kind of thing. So I think it's snapping back. I mean, you remember the early days of ebooks, how everybody was sure that paper was going to die,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes things don't take off the way people think that they do. I mean, ebooks finally settled at whatever percentage they normally are at, but paper's not going to die. People like paper books.
Yeah, I
People
do.
like human created content.
It's funny. So my upcoming book, I have sketches throughout the book, just because I wanted to, like almost like storyboards. I wanted to see
Nice.
what things look like. So I created them myself initially, very roughly with AI. Just this is kind of what I'm thinking, and then I
Mhm.
found an artist, and I'm
Yeah,
like, give me your interpretation of this, but I want this to come from a human being, and I want
right.
because
Yeah.
it's
Good for
flavorful.
you. Yep.
And it's just way more interesting. And they look a little different than what I had imagined. I'm like, yeah, that's great. That's exactly right
Yeah.
because there's feeling behind
Yeah. There's
this.
real creativity behind it, not, electrons.
I mean, do you feel like, I don't talk about AI a whole lot on this podcast, but I'm just kind of curious. Like, I remember like a couple of years ago, somebody who I know a little bit through another industry had kind of asked me about my books. He's like, "Oh, is AI helping you a lot with that?" And I was like so like offended in a way, and now I wouldn't be offended because AI is so prevalent now. I get it, but
Yeah.
that struck me as like, are you serious?
Yeah. Do you think I need the help?
Right, right. But now it's like you would feel like that would be not an uncommon question. And
Yeah.
I have looked at AI in the sense of like, okay, it's great at taking notes when I'm like if I'm reviewing somebody's manuscript for my work, you know, I will read and I'll just be talking as I'm reading,
Yeah.
just giving thoughts because it helps organize my thoughts. Really
Right.
helps keep track. Like I'm use AI like a 1950s secretary, just take notes, take notes, take
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
Um, but it is scary because you don't know where all of a sudden, writers start to say like, oh, maybe they could just write this one paragraph because I'm tired
Yeah.
or
But see, now
whatever.
that language is kind of coming into contracts. I don't know if you've had any recent contracts where it's coming into book contracts that they don't want the authors using AI.
Yeah.
That one
Yeah.
of the
Well,
things
that
you're
makes
signing
sense.
off on is that.
Yeah.
And I
I mean,
know that my agency is making sure that from the publisher's point of view, they aren't either, right? So it is, in some ways, it is kind of getting locked out of like the traditional publishing world to an extent because they want to maintain that human created content. That is their angle on it. I think it
yeah.
should be.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. What worries me is where everything starts to blur, because my partner, for example, is very anti-AI, which I 100% understand. But I
Mine too.
also, I also am like, you know, AI is much more insidious and much more embedded than I think we just think of like, well, I don't use Chat GPT or whatever.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And
But
so
it
it's
also
almost like
depends on
saying,
your definition of AI, right? Because I
right,
mean, let's go back to, I don't know, what would that have been? Word 2000 and Clippy? It looks like you're writing a letter. Let me
right.
help you write a letter. Nobody would have thought that was AI, right?
Yeah, that's a great
But
point.
right, so it's all kind of relative. I think what most people are really afraid of is generative AI when it kind of starts to, sort of take off on its own and be almost more creative on its own, whereas everything else was literally just programming.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think that's true. But it is scary because it's almost like saying like, hey, don't use the internet because it's going to be so embedded into everything. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I find it just depressing a little bit because you feel like you're losing a collective art form
Yeah.
sometimes. But all you can
Yeah.
do is sit down and be like, look, when I'm sitting down and I'm staring at a page and I don't know where it's going, that feeling I get of like, well, let me start doing this. And then all of a sudden something says, what about this? That what
Yeah.
if that occurs to you as a writer is irreplaceable. in
Yeah.
terms of a feeling, I think.
Yeah.
And it's an adrenaline rush. And that's, that's why I do it. Not because I think, I need to get this done or I want to write all these books or it's just like I want to chase that feeling of like going from the unknown to the what if to the execution is, I don't
Yeah, the
know.
creative process is very different from the business of publishing. They have to kind of go hand in glove,
Right.
but the business of publishing doesn't exist without the creative process.
Yeah, I agree. And you need that partnership with your publishers who not only understand your process, but you understanding
Mhm.
their process because we see that a lot too about writers who quite honestly publishers don't want to deal with because they're a pain in the ass
Yeah, yeah, the diva writer. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
And publishing is a business, you know? I mean, that's the bottom line is that people lose contracts or series are ended because publishing is a business and you can't be too precious about it. You have to sort of realize that if you want to publish traditionally, you always have the option of continuing that series self-publishing it.
Right.
But if you want to stick with traditional publishing, you kind of have to go along with their business. And yeah, I mean, making connections inside the publishing house, having a good publicist that you connect with and a good editor that you connect with can make such a big difference.
And having your, like, I'm sure you are like this, having that community of other writers who you've
Hmm.
cultivated through years and years and years to just talk to and be like, hey,
Yeah.
this is my experience. Is this your experience? Because maybe this feels weird to me, or I don't know because I'm in a vacuum. That's been invaluable to me. I know you're part of
Yeah.
Sisters in Crime, for example, right?
No, the Crime Writers of Canada
Crime
is
Writers
the group
of
that I'm
Canada.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm involved
Yeah.
with. And yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's great. I mean, yeah, because you get together and you do events and you talk to each other and they do pub night every once in a while. And it's really great to make contact because writing can be a very solitary process,
Yeah.
kind of an isolationist process. So it's good to make contact with others in the field. And I mean, conferences are great for that. I
Yeah.
like to go to BoucherCon.
BoucherCon Calgary.
Calgary this year. I'm already registered. I got my hotel room. We're all set to go. I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to it. I love Louise Penny. She's going to be there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, making contact with people at like big group events is fantastic.
Yeah. And you have friends
Yeah,
for life.
yeah,
I mean, it's funny, even just through one of the other reasons for this podcast is like, I want to meet other writers. I want to connect with people. And even though it can be a lot of work and after I can guarantee you, after I finish this conversation, as I finish every conversation, I'm energized. I'm like, there's something about having a candid conversation about writing that just reaffirms I love this field. Or if I'm
yeah,
working on a student's manuscript and having a conversation about it and kind of dissecting a plot, it's exciting. I don't know
yeah.
why
It
it is,
reminds
but
you why you do it.
I think that's right. And clearly what's so interesting about you is you took this 25-year hiatus and then it's just like you're all in. You're like, this is
Mhm.
kind of, yes, it was very important work that I did, and I love that. And of course, a person can have multiple personalities in terms of professions, but you can tell you're like, yeah, this is what I was made to do. Do you
Yeah,
feel
that it
that?
had been the goal for years, and I finally got to the point where I could do it, and which was fantastic. I mean, that was very gratifying that I was lucky enough to be able to get to that point.
Right.
And at that point, I figured 32 years in infectious diseases, I'd kind of done my bit.
Right. I mean, but what do you think the difference is in, because a lot of people have goals, a lot of people want to be a
Mhm.
writer,
Yep.
and we talk a lot about the stats about how hard it is to even get an agent, much less getting published. But we don't really talk about the stats because probably they're unknowable of how many people just simply give up.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but it's probably a very high number, right?
I would assume so. I mean, they always say the hardest part of it is finishing your first book. Right? Is actually like lots of people say, "Oh, I really want to write a book," and they maybe even sort of think about it and they write a couple of chapters and then it just sort of peters off,
Yeah,
right? And just being able to finish that first book, to be able to say, "Look, I can do it." I
yeah.
mean, that in itself is pretty fulfilling because you know that you have it within you to do this.
See, I found writing my first book the easiest and it was the fastest I ever wrote a book. And I think it was simply because I literally had no idea what I was doing. So
Yeah.
you're not really taking the time to think about the story as much as maybe you should be.
Yeah.
And then it gets harder and harder and harder and harder, and then it kind of just plateaus, and maybe it gets a little bit easier in terms of the physical act of writing.
Yeah.
But every
Yeah.
book to me is really hard.
Yeah. No, it gets that way. I mean, when you're first writing, it's just you're just writing for the pure joy of it. You're writing for you, and which is great.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, at that point, I mean, that's why I kind of wish I'd seen that early stuff. I had kept some of that early stuff. It would have been awful, but there's a learning curve is a good thing.
Yeah.
For
Oh,
the book that
totally.
I have coming out this year in November, I had to go back and revisit that first forensic mystery series. And the first thing I thought was, okay, as soon as I get some time this summer, I'm going to re-edit every one of these books because the rights came back to me.
I couldn't even
They were
imagine looking
published
at my
with
old stuff.
they were published with Five Star, which was part of Gale Sengage, and they closed that mystery line.
Okay.
So I have the rights for those books, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to just sort of do an edit. Like I'm not going to change the story again, but now I'm a better writer 23 books later than I was when I started that first
Yeah.
book. And even through those 5 books, I could see myself getting better. Like the
Uh,
last book needs a lot less editing than the first book.
yeah.
And so I'm going to do it. I'm going to go back and I'm going to
Oh,
re-edit them and
wow.
just sort of tighten them up a little bit. And just because I want to do that for me so that
Yeah.
they're a little closer to what I'm writing now.
Yeah. Well, that certainly makes sense. I can see that. Um,
Yeah.
well, Jen, we're going to wrap up before we do. We're going to do our little storytelling, which is the reason you agreed to be on the podcast because you were just dying to do the storytelling part. So I don't have 3 books selected, so I'm going to ask you to give me either a color of a book or a genre or a type of author. You give me something, and I'll pick out a book that might work.
Let's go with red.
A red book. All right, so we are going to go.
Please tell me it's not the dictionary.
It's not. It's John Jakes' Love and War, a fat paperback.
Classic. And
So,
we're thriller authors.
as a funny aside, I didn't get into reading really until my 20s. I was living alone in San Francisco. I had zero money. I was working in a hotel, and so I would go to a used bookstore and buy the fattest books I could find because more words for my money. So I was already into Stephen King. That was probably one of the few authors. So I would get all the Stephen Kings, James Clavell, big fat Noble
Oh
House
yeah.
books,
Yep.
Shogun, and then
Yep.
John Jakes. Of John Jakes, I'm
Okay.
like, that's a big book.
Yep.
So I got into
Is that a Civil War novel? Refresh my
uh
memory.
Love and War probably is. Most of his
Okay.
were.
Just
Yeah.
wondering where we're setting whatever it is you're giving
Yeah.
me.
And the type you can barely even see, it's so small. So give me a page number between 1 and 1100.
Holy smokes. 463.
Okay. Oh,
Oh
let's take
boy.
a look at
This is my fault. I
463.
picked red.
All right. I am, you can do whatever you want with this sentence. It's a very basic sentence. Bitter cold again this evening.
She picked up her drink and went to sit by the fire. It was so cold that the windows were icing over, and she was worried about when her husband would be able to make it home.
She was still wondering the same thing 3 drinks in, her eyelids heavy, the fire comforting her with warmth like a blanket when she heard the scratching on the window pane. She thought it was maybe a tree branch from the wind, but when she looked over, she realized she was wrong.
She gathered her courage and walked to the window. She pulled back the heavy drape, the cold wafting over her as she got closer to the pane of glass, and that's when she saw the face.
It disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her with the thought that the alcohol was deceiving her, that it was a reflection from something inside the room, that it was a figment of her imagination, her old fears kicking in again, as they tended to do from time to time. But though the face had disappeared, what was still there in red lipstick were three words spelled backwards.
Reading backwards was difficult, partly because of the alcohol, but she very clearly saw the words were "you will die." She ran backwards, tripping over her chair and falling onto the floor.
Oh, I think we leave it there. I think we leave it there. I mean, the next obvious move is she has to grab the fireplace poker, of course.
Yeah. Oh, we
That
did a
was
good
good.
job of not managing to make it an 1865 novel.
No, no. It's funny. Sometimes I talk to guests and they think we have to be honoring that book. And I'm like, no, no, we're just choosing a sentence.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of these books, I don't even remember the plots.
Well, yeah, yeah. If it's been a while since you've read them, but yeah, especially that one. That one has maybe been a
Yeah,
while.
it's been since my 20s. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
Jen, lovely connecting with you.
It was
And,
lovely talking to you.
congrats on everything and your recent release of Deadly Trade. And I hope
Thank you.
that you find a pace that's manageable for you.
That is the goal. Every year I keep saying, this is the year I'm going to figure out the work-life balance. So one of these years I'm going to actually make it.
Nice, nice. Well, thanks very much. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
All right, friends, that is it. That is my conversation with Jen Danna, who also writes as Sara Driscoll. That was a good one. She had a lot of great insights. And as I even said in the interview itself, I always feel energized after I speak to my guests, and certainly was the case talking to Jen. She's motivating in hearing how much she writes and how much she loves her writing. So I don't know. It gives me a warm feeling all over. What do you want me to say? If you want to find out all about Jen and Sara, you can go to her website at jenjdanna.com. You can pop on over to carterwilson.com to check out my books and all the other goodies I have on the website. And if you're interested in any kind of writing coaching, go ahead and pop on over to unboundwriter.com. All right, friends, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. As always, another episode out just next week. In the meantime, take care.